Toto may not be the most successful or well-loved rock band in the world, but their story is unlike that of any other. For a while, Toto actually ruled the airwaves, but sadly their sunshine days were all too brief. Beyond that, the rest of the band's history is riddled with discord and tragedy. Here's the long, strange, and tragic real-life story of Toto. Many people like to say that a close friend is like their brother, but they tend to forget just how often brothers fight. Just ask Toto. When drummer Jeff Porcaro co-founded the band, he quickly asked his brother keyboardist Steve Porcaro to join in. After original bassist Dave Hungate left the group in 1982, another one of those Porcaros, Mike, jumped from occasional Toto cellist to full-time Toto bassist. But that combination was a bubbling cauldron overflowing with searing hot animosity and resentment. Speaking about the band's early days, Steve later told Classic Rock, "I felt undervalued. Jeff and I were always at each other's throats. Mike got along with both of us, but Jeff and me really bumped heads." Although we recalled Jeff getting frustrated if Steve couldn't reach his perfecting standards, he claimed there was definitely something brotherly going on, since he'd hear Jeff singing Steve's praises whenever he thought his brother wasn't around. There's a strange phenomenon in the music world in which some of the most hated bands inexplicably reach the very highest levels of commercial success. They can sell tens of millions of records and win endless accolades for their work, but still, for some reason or another, they seem to be universally despised. Let's just call it the Nickelback paradox. Toto are cursed with this paradox too. The band's 1982 album Toto 4 spawned two of the most popular radio hits of all time in Rosanna and Africa, which went to number 2 and number 1 in the Billboard Hot 100 respectively. In 1983, the Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences bestowed multiple Grammy Awards on the very popular band, including Album of the Year, Producer of the Year, and Record of the Year for Rosanna. Despite all that, however, Toto struggled to be respected in the industry. Critics already couldn't stand the band. For example, Rolling Stone labeled Toto 4 about as real as a Velveeta orange polyester leisure suit. Meanwhile, Robert Hilburn of the Los Angeles Times claimed there was a disheartening lack of depth or daring in the group's music. Toto's David Paich once shot back at the band's enemies, telling People magazine, "Critics are just fools with no credentials or credibility."
I think we've grown to mature to know that if you've been in a band for 10 years like Toto has, that you're going to be picked on by critics.
The band didn't just talk the talk either. Band member Steve Lukather later told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, "We're the only band in history to turn down the cover of Rolling Stone. We knew they were going to do a hatchet job on us." Like many of the world's most popular bands, Toto split lead vocal duties among its members. But although many of Toto's members took their turns behind the microphone from time to time, it was Bobby Kimball who served as the band's primary singer for its first 4 albums in the late 70s and early 80s. As it happened, the late 70s and early 80s were also a time of widespread cocaine use, perhaps more so than any other era in rock and roll. Band member Steve Lukather told Classic Rock that while Toto dipped into the white stuff back in the day, it wasn't all that big a deal. He said, "We were not the only band that did blow. We weren't as bad as most, but thanks to Mr. Kimball, that became like our badge of honor." In other words, Kimball was doing too much coke, so much so that Toto's Steve Porcaro says it ruined his voice. He later said, "The bottom line was Bobby couldn't sing. I stayed up all night. We all did. The next day my throat would be like ribbons, but I didn't have to sing. Bobby had to, and he just wasn't delivering." And so, in 1983, right after its peak of commercial success, the other members of Toto elected to fire Kimball, right around the same time that Kimball also went on trial for a 1981 incident in which he allegedly sold 4 ounces of cocaine to an undercover cop. As it turned out, Bobby Kimball's distinctive vocal stylings were a key part of Toto's sound and appeal. After he was forced out of the band, Toto's fortunes took a steep downturn. While Toto 4 peaked at number 4 on the Billboard album chart, won a number of Grammys, and went multi-platinum, the group's 1984 follow-up Isolation stalled at number 42. It's often tough to replace the lead singer of an established band, and it was a heck of a tall order for Kimball's immediate successor, Dennis Fergie Fredrickson. A veteran singer with the likes of rock bands like Trillion, Survivor, and La Rue, Fergie certainly had the chops and experience to roll with Toto, but it just didn't work out. He left the band after Isolation, replaced by singer Joseph Williams. Sadly, in June 2010, Fredrickson announced that he'd been diagnosed with an inoperable form of cancer. Less than 4 years later, the former Toto singer died at age 62. It's a rare band in which the leader is the drummer, seeing as how they're stuck behind a mass of snares and hi-hats at the far back of the stage. But they do exist. Fleetwood Mac was definitely Mick Fleetwood's baby. Later-day Genesis was drummer Phil Collins' vehicle, and coming in a respectable third on that shortlist, Toto was Jeff Porcaro's band all the way. He formed the band in the first place, and bandmate Steve Lukather would later label him Toto's figurehead. So it was understandably devastating to the band when Porcaro suddenly died in August 1992 at the age of 38.
To know Jeff was to love him. Those his friends who knew him still miss him very much, and I always will.
Just what caused a seemingly healthy, relatively young guy to drop dead depends entirely on who you're talking to. According to a story published in the Los Angeles Times on August 7, 1992, Porcaro was working in his yard in the San Fernando Valley, spraying plants with pesticide when he fell ill. By the time emergency workers arrived, he wasn't breathing, had no pulse, and his heart had stopped. After briefly reviving him, authorities transported Porcaro to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. A Los Angeles County coroner spokesman attributed the death to a heart attack caused by an allergic reaction to inhaled pesticide spray, but that's not the end of the story. When the Los Angeles County coroner released its official reports on Porcaro a few weeks later, it ruled Porcaro's cause of death to be occlusive coronary artery disease. In layman's terms, a hardening of the arteries brought on by long-term cocaine use. Tests found no trace of pesticide in Porcaro's system, but they did reveal traces of cocaine along with cocaine byproducts. However, Toto band member Steve Lukather wasn't happy with this conclusion at all and disavowed the coroner's report, as well as the news organizations that went ahead and published it. He later told Classic Rock, "It was irresponsible journalism. They found 1/100th of a microgram of cocaine in Jeff's blood. That's like 2 crystals on a matchstick. That ain't gonna give somebody a heart attack, believe me. The rest of us were doing 100 times more than that, and we all lived to tell the tale." Lukather claims that Porcaro's premature death was brought about by a long-standing heart condition and a smoking habit, though nothing of that ended up in the coroner's report. Lukather suggested he was probably smoking a cigarette or a joint. He didn't have gloves on. That's how the chemicals got into his skin. Although Toto topped the charts and dominated rock radio in the early 80s, the band subsequently drifted into semi-obscurity thereafter, the fate of so many artists who were once on top of the world. But that doesn't mean the group disbanded. After the hugely successful Toto 4, the band released 8 studio albums and 4 live albums, a new one arriving in stores every couple of years or so well into the 2000s. Toto stayed an intact touring band for more than 30 years, too, all the way until 2008, which marked the first time the group ever officially disbanded. But by that point, things had become too much for Steve Lukather, so he made the decision to break up the band. As he later told Classic Rock, neither musical nor personnel reasons caused the split. Instead, he needed to end the band to deal with a slew of personal issues. He explained, "I was drinking myself to death. I was losing my marriage. My mother was dying. It was a bad time. I needed to get myself together or I was going to end up killing myself." Happily, Lukather says he soon managed to turn things around. He said, "I quit drinking, went to a shrink, exorcised some demons." Some of the biggest and most influential acts in rock history have been sibling acts, and so was Toto. In 1982, a third Porcaro brother, Mike Porcaro, joined drummer Jeff Porcaro and keyboarder Steve Porcaro in the band. While he'd contributed his cello skills on a few Toto 4 tracks, he became an official member of the group in 1982 after the departure of original bass player David Hungate. And so he stayed, playing bass for Toto on record and on stage all the way until 2007, when he had to quit the band after suffering from some serious health issues. After noticing a numbness in his fingers while playing the bass, Porcaro sought medical treatment, and doctors diagnosed him with ALS, otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease, a devastating and ultimately fatal degenerative neural condition that slowly robs the body of its ability to speak, eat, and breathe. After coping with ALS for 8 years, Mike Porcaro died in 2015 at the age of 59. Toto was a band for some 40 years, and with a length of time like that comes a number of natural changes. Band members arrive, band members leave, and people formerly or currently associated with the band fall away. Sadly, an inordinate number of Toto's musicians have died. Luckily, Steve Porcaro is still with us. But that doesn't mean time has left him unscathed. Steve Lukather later explained to Classic Rock that Porcaro had had a tumor removed from his brain that was thankfully benign. Unfortunately, the operation to remove the tumor also called Porcaro to go deaf in his left ear. And while it's certainly wonderful that Porcaro survived the ordeal of a brain tumor, it's also tragic that a man who makes his living from music would be partially robbed of the gift of hearing. Like so many other bands had done before them, the remaining members of Toto's classic lineup reconvened for a 2015 tour, ostensibly in support of Toto 14, their first album in 9 years. But the real reason the band got back out there is a lot more depressing. They had no choice. In 2008, Toto suspected that its label Sony owed them unpaid royalties for digital downloads. An auditor confirmed that notion, and in 2010, the band sued Sony, seeking more than $600,000 in damages. In addition to filing unsuccessfully for dismissal of the suit, Sony then countersued, demanding $500,000 from Toto, who the label said had overpaid in royalties over the years. Unfortunately for the band, in 2014, a judge ruled that the label didn't owe them any money at all. If Toto needed cash before it sued Sony, they certainly needed it after it lost an expensive years-long legal battle. The group then recorded Toto 14, an act Steve Lukather later said was, quote, born out of litigation. He told Smashing Interviews magazine, "When we came through the litigation, all the left over from management that screwed us and all the other negatives, we decided to turn the negative into a positive. When we put our minds to do the record, we said that we had to make as good a record as we possibly could with all the tools and all the talent and all the experience we've had, and not just phone it in for a check."
Even when things weren't going particularly really well, man, we hung in there. And now, all these years later, I mean, who knew we'd be sitting here?
If nothing else, you've got to give them props for that. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.